We'll get started. I don't know who else is going to show up, but thank you for coming. My name is Jay Trieber. As on the program, company name is Transformative Engineering. We are a one-year-old company that started making products just about this time last year. The journey to HDBaseT for me started because I also own a rather large custom installation company outside of Boston called Home Theater Concepts. And we were, like many other people, frustrated with some of the products we were buying to extend HDMI. Actually, we were also frustrated extending just component analog video as well. So the products I was buying were not quite the way I wanted them. We were buying products that were 40 or 50% or 70% of the way that we wanted them to be made. Either the quality wasn't right, or the application wasn't right, or the engineering wasn't what we wanted to see. But mostly in the analog world, we were buying analog balins that were single purpose. And we had 4 or 5 or 6 different units that we were trying to stock in the trucks, trying to stock in the warehouse, and it just seemed like whatever we had, the guys took the wrong ones with them on the job. And they'd have to come back the next day or reschedule or something. It was just driving me crazy because I know I had spent all this money on inventory, and yet they were having to go back. So I knew there had to be a better way. I'm an electrical engineer as well, and so I started working with a friend of mine in the industry to create this Omni balun, which is a product that we came out with first to do multiple things in one box. So lots of analog things all in one box. Very high quality. We formed a little company named it Transformative Engineering because it's all made of transformers. And we started manufacturing this analog product in Taiwan, and we were pretty successful with it. My installers, my own company, loved it. We started selling them throughout dealers that I knew and associates that I knew, and they all loved it. But looking at that, we knew that the time frame for the analog world was going to be finite. And as the analog sunset came near, we would need a new HDMI solution, a high definition solution, digital solution. So it turns out that in my business, one of my better clients and friends, because he's been a client for almost 30 years, is the president and CEO of a company called Analog Devices. Analog Devices, for those who don't know, is a very large multinational corporation that was one of the founding members of the HDMI Association with Sony and others, and they make millions of chips, and they make an HDMI chip. And in their catalog, which is about that thick, they had a number of HDMI chips that looked to us to be something we could use to make an HDMI extender. So I gave my friend a call, and he said, I have no idea what you're talking about, so come on in. And I went to his office, which is right down the street from my office, it turns out. The worldwide headquarters of Analog Devices is in my town. And we went into his boardroom, and he pretty much opened the company to me. And he, right there, we called his head of engineering on the consumer products division, which is down in, I think was down in Pennsylvania. And he set me up with him, and we started doing some exploratory work on using the HDMI chipsets that Analog Devices makes to make an extender that we could make a product out of. We worked for about 2 or 3 weeks and realized that, again, their product was really made to go inside Pioneer and Sony and Yamaha receivers to create HDMI switching and HDMI transmission back and forth between the display and the sources, and what they call the sink and the source. It wasn't really what we wanted to do. And the engineer there that I was working with at Analog Devices said to me, you know, he said, there's another company that's doing something that's really interesting. He said, have you ever heard of Valens Semiconductor? And at the time I said, no. He said, well, they're in Israel, and they make a new product or a new technology that they've invented called HDBaseT. I think you should give them a call. So he actually had the contact information, and I called, I believe I either emailed or called Israel. In any event, I got a hold of someone at Valens who, once he knew what we wanted to do, he put me in touch with the U.S. representative of HDBaseT, which is a man by the name of Malcolm Edwards in California. And so one thing led to another, and once he realized that we wanted to be a manufacturer, he set us up on the track to become a Valens customer. So we got engineering documents, we got the test kit for doing sample productions and so forth. And it was pretty rigorous. And when you get at that level, it's very detailed, and there's a lot of documents to read through. And so we started, myself and my engineering partner at my company, started doing research and engineering work on the boards that they send us for creating samples and so forth. And after a while, we realized that what we were trying to do for a small company was going to take a long time and take a lot of money to do things from scratch. So we went back to the people in Valens and asked them if they had any suggestions on how to buy a packaged, pre-made something. So once they learned what our end game was supposed to be, which was to make the highest quality, most feature-laden product that HDBaseT allows, they said, yeah, you're probably over your head, because you would need to have huge resources, assembly line and packaging, and someone who's, you're so beyond starting, you're right at the start of the curve. So they hooked us up with a vendor or manufacturer in Taiwan. Actually gave us the name of a couple of people in Taiwan to talk to who were already Valens customers building HDBaseT. At that point it was version 1.0 product. My engineering partner in my company happens to be Taiwanese, and so he actually had some very good ideas of who is in the factories in Taiwan, because he actually owns a factory, and that's what we were making the analog bale in, his factory. So he was about to fly to Taiwan to do some other things anyway, and he went and checked out the people that Valens had suggested. And we made a very good relationship with one of the vendors in Taiwan that they recommended, who seemed to be knowledgeable in the technology and the manufacturing, and he had a very well-run factory, the best that my partner could see. And so we began a relationship with these people in Taiwan, and he started by first giving us some samples of products he had been making for other people, version 1.0. And they were okay, but they weren't what we wanted. I should also back up and mention that as we started doing all this, before we even got into the Valens product, we went out and bought every HDMI extender that was on the market that I could see that I typically would use. And a lot of them came from OEM people in Taiwan. And my guy knows by taking something apart whose factory it is. There's telltale signs. That's what he does. So none of the non-HDBaseT stuff was even close to being acceptable. It just wasn't reliable. It was made to be as cheap as possible, and it didn't work as we insisted it worked, which was reliably, consistently, and scale to scale, so that we could know if we made 1,000 of these, everyone would be the same. So when we got the samples back from the person doing the HDBaseT samples, we found that they worked, and they all worked well, but because we had started doing engineering on our own, we saw that there were parts of the HDBaseT roadmap that were not being applied to any of the samples he was sending us. And what was interesting is that when we went back to him and said, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And why did you leave this off? The answer was very polite, but it was always the same. It was because of cost. And all his designs were being driven by his customers' requests to make the cheapest, or least expensive, I should say, product he could, which meant decontenting a feature or downgrading a feature. That wasn't our intent. We wanted to be a premier product because we were a very small company. And we all had other jobs. We all had other businesses that we were running that we were really taking our income from. We were able to say, let's do this right. We can control our overhead, and we can just make a really good product. So we went back to him and said, well, what would it cost to put that feature in? Or what would it cost to add that feature back that you pulled out? And what was really interesting was that the answer came back something like $1.40, 72 cents, $1.33. It was small money. But of course, you start adding them up, and you start multiplying them through the distribution chain. At the end, sure, it might have added $40, $50, $60 to the end user's price. But we said, let's look at this rationally, because it's easier for us to start from scratch and build it the way Valens intended it to be built, or HDBaseT's consortium intended it to be built, rather than to come out with a product that's just like everyone else's and just have a Me Too product. So we did, and we came out with a product, and I neglected to bring one, but I'm having it brought over. Our HDBaseT product is called the HDOne, and when we brought it out, it was the very first 1.4A HDMI extender in the world. And it had every feature known that could be done in an HDBaseT product at the time. So we had things like ARC, we had an Ethernet switch, we had power from the transmitter. No one else had done that. Everyone else was using two 5-volt power supplies, one on the receiver and one on the transmitter. And our argument was, I'm looking at the engineering drawings, and it's saying it uses 24 volts to be designed to power the receiver on the other end. And everyone that we talked to thought that was a great feature, that you didn't have to have a wall wart behind the television. Seemed like a no-brainer, but it added like $5 to the price of the product. There's the answer. So we maintain that same philosophy in everything that we do. Is if there's value in the feature function and the price is within reason, we should do it. And so that's our approach to not only the HDBaseT product, but to everything else that we build. I think that had we not found HDBaseT, I'm not even sure we'd have a company, because everything else we tried was unacceptable as far as reliability. And we weren't ready to make a product that was like everyone else's. What was the point of that? It wasn't answering my quest, which was to have a product that was reliable, that was a high quality. We also did things like tooled our own cabinetry, our own chassis. The HDBaseT product in those days, not so much now, but the HDBaseT product in those days, to get all your features and functions, generates an awful lot of heat. And actually, it runs up to 170 degrees on the board. So most of the other people who chose HDBaseT found that either you decontent it again to remove some of those heat-generating features, or you make a cabinet that cools it properly. Our approach was, let's deal with the heat in a more intelligent way. So we tooled our cabinet in an extruded aluminum form, and we used the entire cabinet as a heat sink. And it also gave us a very nice looking cabinet, extremely rugged. You can drive over it. You can figure out standing on it, you can drive over it. And we do some, it just looked nice and it feels good to hold in your hands. So that was our journey to HDBaseT. We became a member of the HDBaseT Alliance, and this last month we upgraded our membership to a contributor member. And that gives us benefits, gives us some insight into where HDBaseT is going, and also the ability to make recommendations as a contributing member. That's the whole point of being a contributor. You can contribute into the alliance. And we're going to do that. So this CEDIA show, we improved our original product because HDBaseT has added features. And it's part of the original. What you find in any technology is you can engineer something, but then it's another story to actually build it. And even on the micro level, the integrated circuit level, there were features that were designed into the original architecture that we couldn't even put in the original product because no one made the chipset for it. Now there are some things that are coming online. We're adding chipsets to our original product, and we now can add things like HEC, the home Ethernet channel, over HDBaseT, so that it comes out of the HDMI connector rather than coming through our switch port. We're adding POH, which is a really cool feature this year. And POH is power over HDBaseT. So we are we're taking our 24-volt transformer that powers the transmitter and powers the receiver. And at the receiver end, there's a little DC power jack, which we're going to get 24 volts at 3.5 amps out of. And we're going to be able to power ancillary products like amplifiers, like small televisions. And those of you who've been able to see the demonstration in the HDBaseT booth, they have a television that runs off of the device. So you don't need any power to power the television. At a certain point, sure, you can't do a 50-inch plasma, but I think it's 100 watts, I think, is the current total. If you put enough in, you can get 100 watts out at the other end, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. So we're going to start by utilizing the HDBaseT, and we're going to wind up having other products that aren't necessarily HDMI related, but they're certainly related to HDBaseT. So this is the basis for our company to have a family of products around HDBaseT. So it's not just about HDMI, it's about all the other things you can hang on to it. We've had a very good relationship with the people at Valens and HDBaseT, and we're excited about the technology. I think ultimately Valens and HDBaseT would love to have an RJ45 jack on the back of a television and an RJ45 jack on the back of a Blu-ray player and a receiver, and just hook it up with Ethernet cables. That would destroy my company, but I'm not sure that will happen, because in the greater world of electronics, consumer electronics in particular, every dollar that a manufacturer like Sony or Samsung or Toshiba or whoever puts into a television is $3 or $4 that the customer's going to have to pay for at the end of the day. And they just keep dropping the prices on this stuff, and they're so price sensitive. I don't believe in that, but that's the way it is. So as a result, unless this HDBaseT technology gets to be so inexpensive, I'm not sure that'll ever happen. And by the way, not everybody needs to run 100 meters or 50 meters of HDMI wire. So they'd be putting something in a television or a receiver or a Blu-ray player for maybe 2 or 3 or 10% of the population's needs, and necessarily having to raise the price of all the televisions to do that. So ultimately, we'd like to see it as a universal answer to extension of HDMI and other things that HDBaseT has in the pipeline. And so the scalability is there, not necessarily in the original manufacturing of televisions and Blu-ray players and receivers. And this looks like it. You can just pass them around.
Okay.
Thank you. They've seen them. For those who haven't seen it.
I'm really glad you brought up the note about the heat.
Yes.
I was actually personally just testing one of these like a week ago.
And you go, wow.
And yeah, we left it alone overnight, came back, still working absolutely perfectly, but I was blown away at how hot it was.
170 degrees. So,
Well, I mean, if it's stable, right?
right. The only thing we don't want you to do is putting them in a wall, or even in an enclosed wall box, because that makes it worse. You get no air circulation. Now, I can tell you that another advancement this year on HDBaseT, which you may not have heard, is that there's a new feature called Power on Demand, which means that the receiver, which is the one that gets really hot, won't turn on unless it's calling for power. So if your TV is off and the HDMI is not active, it shuts off and it's cold. So it will stay much cooler in the long run. Also, even when it's on, it's about 10 degrees cooler than they used to be. It's a more efficient use of some power internally. In our case, we are now packing with our product some thermally conductive double stick tape, which is really some cool stuff that I found. And so you just stick that on the back of a TV if you can, and then you'll get a great amount of coolant on the chassis of the television. Right. Or you could stick it to a piece of metal and just mount that to the wall.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do. So yeah, so the heat is an issue. But we're doing so much stuff in there, and most of the biggest difference is the audio return channel. That takes a lot of power to do that, turns out. The other thing that we announced at the show today or yesterday was a small version of HDBaseT. We call it the Mini-Me for miniature multimedia extender. And it's a very small piece, and it's about the size of a single gang box, and we think it can go in a single gang box. We haven't actually tried it yet, but it's very small. And it only does HDBaseT, HDMI, and IR. It is still powered by one power transformer at the transmitter side, but it doesn't do ARC, it doesn't do RS-232, it doesn't do Ethernet, it doesn't do any of that stuff. But it runs very cool, comparatively speaking, and you could put that in a box, and it's much smaller. So, and the best part about it is about half price.
What's the name of that one?
It's called the Mini-Me, M-I-N-I-M-E, Mini-Me. We sort of like funky names. The Omnibalin is called the OB1. We have a quad matrix switcher that has 4 inputs and 4 outputs, and it's modular. Those of you who haven't seen it at our booth, 3404. So you take 4 HDMI inputs, and it has 4 HDBaseT output cards. And you can take the HDBaseT card out and put a standard HDMI output card in. So you can have it loaded up any combination of HDMI outputs and HDBaseT outputs, and you get a 4-in, 4-out matrix switcher. We're going to supply it as a card case, a card cage with no cards, and then you load it up as a dealer with the cards you want. So if you want a 2x2 or a 1x3 or whatever you want, so you just pay for what you need. Once you load it up to 4x4, if you need more than that, you can take 2 of ours, link them together with a card, and you wind up with an 8x8 or a 1x8 or a 3x4 or whatever you want. And again, in any combination of those things you'd like. On the receiver end, you'll be able to use either our original product, which you're holding, to get all the features if you want ARC and all the Ethernet stuff and all that, or you can use the Mini-Me if all you want is HDMI to be transferred. Again, it's all about proper application and getting the most value for your dollar, because I'm not looking for you to spend the most money. I'm looking for you to spend the least but getting the most. That's because, again, it's what I'm looking to do in my business. I got to believe it's what everybody wants to do, is give the client the best product they can for the money, but you don't want to be running back there and taking these phone calls all the time, because there's nothing more cost wastive or profit wasting than having to go back and do a service call you can't get paid for, or not getting paid for the job because the customer is not happy that it doesn't work right. So those are the things that drove us to HDBaseT. They continue to make us appreciative of HDBaseT because it is a technology that works. It's interesting that, to come full circle, I went back to my friend and client at Analog Devices, and for, once he introduced me to the engineers, he's out. He's had more important things to do in life. But when I explained to him why we went with HDBaseT, he was surprised, first of all, because he didn't understand that the standard HDMI chipset is so problematic. He didn't understand that what he's been making literally millions and millions and millions of dollars on is so problem-prone, and that Valens did a better job of that than the people who designed HDMI, basically. But it's the architecture of HDMI is there because of the stringency with HDCP, the copyright protection. HDBaseT, as you know, it's an uncompressed format. It doesn't touch the HDCP. It doesn't change it in any way. It just handles it in such a way that it's exactly the same at point A as it is at point B. Any other issues you might have with HDBaseT, you really don't have it with HDBaseT. You're having it with HDMI. as you would if you had a perfect 100-meter long cable. You're going to have the same problems with anything you put in between. If the handshake is not right, if the display isn't right, if the EDID table's not right, all that's going to be duplicated throughout the HDBaseT chain or anybody else. So, but you don't want to introduce any more problems. And that's the beauty of HDBaseT, is that it doesn't introduce any other variables. It just does a good job of making what looks like to HDMI a good cable. That's the whole point. That product you're handling around was just certified by Valens as an HDBaseT product, which means we can now put the official HDBaseT logo on it. As an aside, you know, we're also an HDMI licensee, and we pay royalties to them too. Their application of their licensing requirements and their logo is that you can stick it on their product as long as you pay the money. HDBaseT will not let you use their logo until and unless your product has been certified, that it works to their approval. That's great, because that tells you, hopefully as an installer, that this product is designed properly. And although you have to, we as an adopter normally pay for that test, I think to keep that stability in the marketplace, the assurance that you have that if you know if it's got the logo on it, someone else besides me says this is built right. I think that's great. So I applaud HDBaseT for that, and I hope they continue to do that, keep it up. Yes.
Sorry, quick question.
Sure.
The matrix switcher you're talking about,
Yeah.
is that on display right now?
It is at the booth. Yeah, we have two of them, back to back, so you can see our devices they look like. So it's kind of cool because we're going to have buttons on the front. There's 4 buttons and a display. So as you hit like the button 1, the display says 1, 2, 3, 4, and button 2 says 1, 2, 3, 4. And then when you link them two together, the display will let you go to 8. That is kind of cool. But again, the modules we have now, they have full HDBaseT input. Full HDMI. It's basically all the jacks and plugs that are on the transmitter of the piece that's going around now on the transmitter side, and the output module is simply an RJ45 for the HDBaseT. So that'll just slide out, and you can put an HDMI one in just to do an HDMI matrix switcher. And you could buy this, by the way, just as an HDMI switcher and not do anything with HDBaseT 4x4. It's still very price competitive to do it that way. But if you want to mix and match the HDBaseT stuff, that's really what it's designed for. We have had a lot of discussion at the show today, and I'll just ask you guys. A lot of people thought a third module would be good to have both HDBaseT and an HDMI on the same module. The problem with that is we found that's, again, an expensive module to have both on it, because we have to build a splitter into it. And I'm not sure how many people want that. It might be easier to just plug in a small HDMI cord to just double check if you want to look at something locally, and then use the HDBaseT module for the long runs, or I suppose you could always use the miniature HDBaseT extender off of an HDMI output board. It's probably more cost effective to do it that way. But we may, at the end of the day, we may just make a third module and let that happen. But it will ship initially with the HDBaseT modules or the HDMI modules for output modules.
And both types of modules have just an RJ45 output?
No, the HDMI output module has an HDMI connector on it. Yeah. The HDBaseT just has an RJ45 because everything else is done at the other end, where it breaks out to the whatever you want. And again, you can use the receiver that comes with the Mini-Me, or the receiver that comes with the one you're passing around. We'll make those available separately too. So we go through distribution. We're not really wanting to sell directly to dealers. So we've set up a number of distributors, stocking representatives, and they'll sell to the dealers because, again, this is not my day job. And I don't want to set up a whole organization to handle dealer sales. We're trying to keep our overhead down so we can make the product better for a lower price and still get a great product to you. The distribution, however, is still being set up. So if there's anybody that really wants a product that we don't have distribution in, I know, for example, Florida, I don't have anybody right now doing that. So we'll sell direct. Take credit card and ship it direct.
What about Canada?
Canada has positive marketing. Good guy. Yep.
We've got so many products already. So
Great. Yep, there you go. We are OEMing it. We're manufacturing for some people directly. So Avid came to us and said, wow, we'd like a version of this. Can you make one for us? So we just changed the silk screen on the Avid stuff, quite honestly. And we have under their ProConnect name, they have both the analog Balun and the HDOne, the HDBaseT one. We've just signed an agreement with the people at B&K. They're going to have the new improved version with their name on it, B&K. And we'll with enough quantity, and we'll OEM something for somebody. We have the engineering staff, myself and my Taiwanese engineer. So we can, if somebody came to us and said, can you build something a little differently for us, we can offer that. If they really don't want some feature, we can take it off and make it a little less money. But it won't have our name on it. It'll just have their name on it, because that's not my philosophy. But we can do that. What else? Anything else? I mean, I imagine anyone who's had the frustrations with previous attempts at HDMI extension know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to blame anybody who's tried that from a manufacturing standpoint. For example, for years, the only people out there that had them were significant companies like Geffen and Key Digital, and those are good people. They make good products. But when I got into the HDMI chipsets that were available, again from Analog Devices and others, no matter how good of an engineer you are, this stuff just doesn't. It's not designed for that purpose. It just doesn't work well for that purpose. They were designed originally to just sit inside a receiver or sit inside a DVD player and just do that. They were never designed to extend between two very long distances over Cat5. So there's other issues that come into all that. So that's what led us to HDBaseT, and I'm glad it did, because now I have something that works. When it doesn't work, nothing's going to work. For example, there's a couple of manufacturers of receivers right now, I'm not going to name them, but they're having issues with extenders, whether it's mine, Wirestorms, Geffen's, whoever. And with testing, it turns out that it's not the extender that the problem is. Whether it's an HDBaseT or a non-HDBaseT or even long HDMI wire, it doesn't work well. It's because there's an issue with the chipset that's inside the receiver, and it's not necessarily manufacturer ABC's fault either. It's the manufacturer of the chipset. So we're all, as manufacturers, we're all subject to the issues that happen with technology. And if you buy what you are told works, and you can just do so much testing, and until it gets out in the field, some of these things don't show up as well. We just did an installation in my installation company where we did a theater room, and all we had to do was run HDMI 15 feet to the projector. So we said, fine, we have HDMI cables that we've used for years, 25 footers, 15 footers, never a problem. A brand new receiver, brand new, just came in this year's model, wouldn't even work over a 15-foot cable. So then my guys took the HDOne, the extender that we have, an HDBaseT, and that didn't work either. So they immediately thought they had a bad cable or a bad receiver or a bad projector or a bad whatever. So they swapped the receiver, same exact thing. So back at the office, we do testing, and we find that nothing worked on this receiver. Then we took another receiver, and nothing worked on that one. I took another model from the same manufacturer, again this year's, nothing worked. So when I say nothing, I could get a Blu-ray player with a 3-foot cable to work fine. But the minute you go over like 10 or 15 feet, it wouldn't work. And nobody's extenders work, not mine, not Wirestorm, not Geffen's, nobody's, because I have them all, because we test them all. And so right now we sent that receiver to Valens in Israel. It's going to be there Tuesday morning. They're going to totally examine it, and I'm positive that they'll find the reason really quickly. And it'll probably be fixed by a firmware upgrade that someone will figure out, hopefully the manufacturer. And that's what we do. So The HDOne that you're handing around, there is a method by which we could upgrade firmware to it. We looked at that, and we decided not to allow the RS-232 port to do that. And the reason is that someone at one point told us that firmware from one manufacturer's product certainly is not the same as someone else's, but people try. So you might get a firmware upgrade from a Geffen piece and try to put it into ours or vice versa. So we didn't want that liability. If there is a firmware change because of an EDID table upgrade or something, we will offer that back at our office to bring it up to speed. We offer a 3-year warranty on the product. To date, we've had no issues at all, so we're pretty confident that it's a solid product, solid technology, and we're going to continue to develop with it. Anything else? Well, I invite you all to stop by the booth, 3404. You can look at the extender, you can look at the Mini-Me, which is really cute, and you can look at some of the other stuff we've got. We also have a 4-way HDMI switch that's not HDBaseT, but that's the first 1.4A HDMI splitter. That's 4K, 2K, 3D, and all that. And we handle the EDID table in a very unique way so that it actually does work as a 4-way splitter. Even though it's not HDBaseT. Because we're just splitting HDMI, but we're actually manipulating the EDID table so that the source device is not confused and doesn't shut down. That's it, I guess.